Okay, so today this is a first, I think, for Mo Better Bands because we have two awesome band directors, but they're not from Missouri, which was kind of where the Mo part of Mo Better Bands got started in, with us focusing on Missouri schools. But I think that you two, this tandem we have today, is our first duo that's from outside of Missouri, which is really exciting. And it couldn't be with a better pair than Kirsten Smallwood and Erin Lloyd. Now, Kirsten Smallwood is director at Chapman USD 473, which is in Kansas and kind of probably to most listeners between Topeka and Kansas City, maybe like around Manhattan, south of Manhattan. Topeka, am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, you could just say it's like right off of I-70, like most of Kansas is. You're either
Perfect.
on
Yeah.
I-70 or you're not.
Right. I think you could say that about the entire state of Kansas, right? And then Erin Lloyd's at Riley County, USD 378, which is a similar territory. I think you're a little closer to Manhattan, if I remember correctly, though, Erin. Is that
Yeah,
right?
we're about 20 minutes northwest of Manhattan.
Okay, we're testing my geography for for Kansas. Having purchased Flint Hills Music in Emporia, Kansas, I've kind of always been sort of Kansas City centric, and so I'm learning the rest of the territory as we go. So, and yeah, and this is going to be really fun because the both of you, you're both younger teachers in that you're less than halfway through your career. But you're both like having a lot of success with what you're doing. I've had the pleasure of being in both of your classrooms, got to see you both in action, see what your classes are like, and see that you both like really have a lot on the ball already. And today we're going to talk about kind of a variety of those things, but we're also going to really dive into marching band and what it's like to put together your marching band in one of these kind of rural settings. We're in a school district that's not in a big population setting. And then we're also going to talk about the challenges that go with that, with preparing for marching band, retention, and just kind of all the challenges that we have with doing a marching band program in a rural setting. And then Kristen and Erin also started a fest, Bandtoberfest, that they started last year. And so we're going to talk about that, and then probably kind of whatever else sort of pops up. So anyway, Kirsten and Erin, super happy to have you join me today or this evening for this podcast. This is going to be a lot of fun. So welcome to Mo Better Bands.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So probably when we ask questions, maybe these first couple of questions, when you answer, just give me your name real quick. So people who are just listening and not watching, they can maybe try to identify like whose voice goes to who. And then we'll give them a couple tries at that. And after that, they just have to figure it out on their own. So, anyway, so this is going to be a lot of fun. So let's start with talking about teaching in a rural school district. And some of the challenges that you've encountered, specifically putting together field shows in those districts. And it doesn't, whoever would like to go first, you feel free just to jump in and we'll kind of figure it out.
I'll go first. I'm Kirsten. Hi. um, I feel like Erin and I have talked about this a couple times on some other platforms. The biggest challenges kind of we're seeing from putting band together in a rural setting is mostly that we're sharing kids with everybody. Like I can't think of any student in my high school program that is not involved in at least one other club or one other sport. Absolutely. And so there's a lot less that we can afford to do. So like more competitive areas, you're typically going to have after school rehearsals and do kind of all that stuff. We have to make sure 9 times out of 10, it's going to be in that class hour, and that's all you get, depending on what your class hours look like. And I think that goes into kind of the retention as well, when you're saying you can still play your sport and do band because we're able to accomplish it during the school day. So you're not sacrificing one of your other activities. And I have a ton of farm kids too. So they've got to go to their sport and then they've got to go work on the farm. And gotcha. So you're like, there is no other time for you to come and do this other than during the day. And I want you to do it. So I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get you here and to just make it work.
That is challenging to make that fit as only part of the school day, especially when the trend in field shows now is to put ungodly amounts of time and resources into it. So how long is that class period that you have them for, and how many days a week do you see them?
So for my band, I see them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for a 50-minute period. And then on Thursdays, I'll see them for an hour and a half, and I won't see them on Friday. So it's kind of like a modified block schedule. So we've got a 7-period day, Monday through Wednesday, and then block schedule Thursday, Friday. So our other challenge is that we don't have a field at the school that we're at. So the field is at the middle school.
Oh,
So we have to bus everybody to the field to
oh my
rehearse, which
gosh.
we can't do in those 50-minute periods. So we're doing like music and sectionals, and we're not lucky enough that it got destroyed by a tornado, but we're lucky enough that we have a newer building because of the tornado that we have a multi-purpose room. So I've lined out all of the field markings on the multi-purpose room. And so we'll go and set drill on Wednesdays. And then on Thursdays, when we have that longer period, we can go put them on the field.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So you've got like essentially 3 days a week that you're doing an indoor rehearsal in a multi-purpose room where you're able to work on music and set drill. But when you set that drill, can you work on getting from one set to the other, or is there not enough
It's
room for
tight.
that?
It's tight. Not luckily, our band is kind of small right now, so we can kind of smush them into that multi-purpose room. Should the band grow in the future, we're gonna have to reassess what we're gonna do, but that's a later
Gotcha.
problem.
What's the size of that room you're in terms of like what's your yard? Can you get 40 to 40 on there, or what's your
The
size
walls
there?
are 30, so if I put anybody on the 30, they're standing against the wall, like smushed against it, and
Gotcha.
I just tell them to
Gotcha.
suck it up for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, that is definitely challenging and definitely a tight space. Erin, how about you? How does this look like on your end, rehearsals?
Kind of similar. We're on just a traditional block schedule. So I have 85-minute periods, but we're alternating either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So similar challenge, which is also a reason that I do love being at a 3A school, and reason that I got into it was that the kids can do everything, which is fantastic. I want them to
Hmm.
graduate as a well-rounded student, a strong musician, and explore all their interests in high school, because that's the whole point of it all. But at the same time, they're in everything. So we have those 85-minute class period times, and that's it. We can't have any other outside of class practices or rehearsals or so it is very fast and furious teaching and learning the moment you see them till the moment the bell rings, and they're probably late to their next class, but it'll be okay.
Right. So I would think you'd have to have a couple things. One, you'd have to have realistic expectations for what you
Mhm.
can accomplish during this time period. Um, but then you also have to have like a very good plan of what you're going to do. Like, because you don't have the spare time to just sort of wing it or to
Mhm.
kind of roughly figure it out as you go. Like with both of the schedules that you've shared, both of them, you've got to pretty much have it like everything is planned out to the minute, like you know what you're doing each time. There's no time for, people to screw around or waste time or whatever. So maybe let's talk about that first thing. What are your expectations? Does your limited rehearsal time, how does that affect the expectations for what you put out on the field?
I think it's something that's developed over the last couple of years. This is the first time that we've put a full show memorized onto the field. And that's just been something we've been able to grow on. We didn't have any other change in schedule. That was just an expectation I set from the very beginning. So we were able to dedicate more time to that. And pros and cons, there were some days that we had terrible weather or the field was being tended to or things like that. So we were able to focus more on that. But um, I mean, realizing that you want them to, our full show is probably only about 12 sets long. So it's not like we're putting an extraordinary amount on the field. I would say compared to normal trends in marching band, we're still more of the Friday Night Lights. We're playing AC/DC or, something that's more of a crowd pleaser instead of a tradition or a more trending
Avant-garde. Yeah. Yeah.
traditional, yeah, with sound.
BOA style
Absolutely.
competition show. Yeah. Yeah.
We're not having a whole lot of body movements or dancing on the field, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. Although Kirsten has put some cool dancing on their field on last year's show, I think it was. So she can still make it happen.
I mean, they made a box. They went left and then right and then left and then right. And we were like, yay, you guys all did it.
But I think that's important to have, realistic expectations for what you can do in that time to achieve the quality that you want. And Erin, you kind of mentioned something that is also really important for people to consider, that the more years this exists, the more kind of institutional knowledge is there, which allows you to kind of do more over time, right? So probably that first year, there's a whole lot of just explaining what marching is and like a whole lot of just basic stuff. And then as it goes on, like you start having students who've been if you've been able to retain them, as we'll talk about here in a minute, then they retain that knowledge and you're not having to teach the entire band how to march 8 to 5 steps or whatever. And you can start working on movement or additional sets or whatever else. It gets easier each year as you do it.
Absolutely.
Kirsten, how about you?
I would counter off of that, or not counter off of that, but add on to that my upperclassmen help me out the absolute most. Mm-hmm. Like they have it in their brains, they're good, and they are catching everybody that's kind of falling under the radar to know, here's the expectation, this is what we're doing, we're getting it done. In those small time frames that I have, we've set a very clear, Mondays are music days. We are in the band room, standing, marking drill, working on music. And then Tuesdays are sectional days, and they are fully in charge of running their own sectional, and I'm going to come work with who I need to come work with. And Erin and I are by ourselves. We don't have an assistant director, we don't have a drum tech. So I'm working with color guard on their choreography, I'm with the drum line fixing everything there. And so it's just kind of like bouncing around from there. And then Wednesdays we're setting the drill in the multipurpose room, and then Thursdays they know that they're going to be on the field.
Gotcha. So again, you have like a plan, the week is planned of what you're doing. Everyone's got it. Tell me about, so there's a lot of student leadership, which is tremendous. I mean, that allows you to multiply your efforts because now you have like a bunch of other leaders that are helping to make this happen. Also, you're creating more value in your program because your program's now not just about playing music, but it's what we all know band does, which is also create future leaders and leadership as well. What kind of training and expectations do you put forth for those section leaders?
We just sat through a whole PD talking about classroom management and setting expectations in August. So we, mine especially, day one of band camp is just leadership folks. And so we'll sit and we'll walk through the plan for the week, knowing exactly what they need to be doing. I'm sorry if you hear my dog, she's upstairs and angry at something. So working them through that process and then coaching them through it as we go, like, hey, maybe try doing this differently. And then also I've got, my leadership handbook. Here's how sectionals need to run. You're not directly in charge of anybody, but you're making sure everyone's on task. You're not going to yell at somebody for them not being on task. You're going to come tell me, so it doesn't get out of hand, as I feel like some older generations have when it comes to section leaders.
Yeah. Erin, how about you? Do you have section leaders in your program?
It's kind of, I've kind of done something different each year. I did more of like a woodwind captain and a brass captain this year. I mean, because then they're only looking over about 20 people. It's not like we have massive sections. And that kind of gives me a counter point for each of them when we do split off into sectionals. But the most important roles are drumline captain and color guard, because they spend the most time on their own. So those were an interviewed and appointed position. And so I work with those kids and the drum major a lot more directly throughout the season, check-ins on how things are going, how I can assist them, and then what they need to keep growing and moving forward. But there are pretty clear expectations of, okay, this is what we need to be working on, these measures, this is probably where you're going to run into errors, and this might be some way that you can help teach it, because sometimes they can just say, well, this isn't going right, but I don't know what to do other than just run it again. So it's more of just a little feedback right immediately of, hey, this isn't going well. How can I help them? I tell them how to go back to their group while I keep working with another group, and just kind of dividing and conquering.
Yeah. When you're looking for section leaders, what qualities are you looking for?
Likability is kind of important on top of the musical knowledge, and that they are good communicators, which kind of comes with that. So that way they can not only talk to their peers, but then they can also communicate to myself or other section leaders on things that need to be taken care of.
Kirsten, how about you?
I would agree with both of those, but also are you dependable? Are you going to be here and do what you're supposed to do and do what I ask you to do and what I need you to do? Because I can't do it on my own. So being willing to be a team player within the band, but also within the leadership team. We've also done leadership swaps where you switch sections and then it goes really chaotically, but it's really fun.
Tell me more about that. I've never heard of that, but that sounds amazing. Tell me more about that.
Erin and I both went to K-State and we did leadership swaps, I feel like, probably with the rookies. And like section leaders would switch sections. And that's kind of where I pulled that from, just to get somebody's different opinion or a different view on something. Because you can hear the same thing 5 times in a row and maybe think that it's right, but then put somebody different in there, it's not the same. So it's kind of like bringing in people to listen to your band,
Yeah.
just getting different ears, getting different eyes if you're moving drill. It doesn't go that chaotically. Sometimes.
It's a good idea, though. I like that.
Do either of you ever have issues with students that kind of take that section leader role, like it goes to their head a little too much and they get a little too carried away with like
Yes.
whatever perceived authority they have or whatever? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I've had it happen before.
And how you handle it is sorry.
Yeah. It's kind of just been like, hey, you're doing the most and I need you to be less. So let's take it down a notch. And sometimes it just takes like, hey, hop into my office. We're going to chat for a minute. Be less. Thank you. I can be the most. You can be less.
Yeah.
I will handle it from here. So it's luckily most of the time it's resolved itself. So it hasn't been too big of an issue yet. And hopefully it doesn't continue to be.
Yeah.
I should say I had a drum major once that she just didn't realize that she was being too much. Like I pulled her in, I was just like, hey, do you feel like they're responding to you in the way that you want them to? Well, no, because let's be a little self-reflective here and think about maybe they didn't exactly enjoy this approach, or how can we just even your tone of voice? we can address some of that, because it was very, I am in charge.
Yeah.
And they didn't like it.
I was a section leader in high school and in college. And at my high school, and of course, remember, this was also a long time ago. So I think things have changed a little bit, but honestly, my oldest is not that far out of high school. My youngest is in high school and in marching band. So like, there's a lot of similarities even back to the early 90s in terms of like student issues and stuff. But I remember my first year in band, our section leaders were jerks. Like they were mean, they were hard on us. There was a lot of hazing. Yeah, they were intimidating. They were bullies. And so I thought, well, that's what leadership is. And so, as you can imagine, when I became section leader, it's monkey see, monkey do, because I had no actual leadership training. And so I did the same thing because I thought that's what it meant to be a section leader. And then I got into college, and at college, it's just kind of a different thing. Like you're not really competing, and you're doing marching band, but you're honestly there just to like play really well and have fun with friends. And you're not like the band's not trying to win on Saturday, and so it's just kind of a different vibe. And I never realized how bad it was until my second year in college. An incoming freshman who was in my section in high school came in. I'll never forget him. His name's Damon Hudson. And Damon, like later, a couple of months later, after we had spent some time just kind of getting to know each other again and reconnecting, told me that when he saw that I was there and that I was the section leader, he almost dropped out. He was like, you were such a jerk in high school. He was like, I was just like, there's no way I'm doing this. It's not worth $500 a semester to put up with this jerk. And it made me feel so bad that was his experience and recollection in high school. And so I just tried to make up for it in college. And in college, I really tried to turn that around and just be more inclusive and more friendly and fun. But I've always just kind of kept that memory. And then as I work with my sons, because both my sons are in leadership, student leadership in their band programs, they've had similar challenges sometimes, and so trying to just encourage them about like, hey, like, let's talk about what leadership means. Like, my youngest son, for example, like, he's a really good tuba player, and he just has natural ability because he is in a musical family, and his mom's a band director. His mom was his middle school band director. His dad, and both she and I play all the time together. I mean, like, this is a very, very music family. Literally, while I was waiting for you guys to connect, I was practicing my trumpet. Like, so he's just around this all the time. And we talk about it a lot as a family. He gets lots of playing opportunities that other students wouldn't get. I'm like, you just have to recognize that your peers, especially on the tuba, are just not being challenged the way you are. Like, they're just not. So you just have to like give them some grace, because they're not going to have that. And then when he wasn't in charge and other people were in leadership, reminding him that like, these are volunteer positions, these are students, like, they probably have had very little leadership coaching and training. And so what you can do is just try to think about how you would do it differently and try to just kind of manage those expectations. But I could see how he could quickly go down the dark path of wanting to be bossy or complain or whine or whatever. And but it's always a challenge for sure.
In our leadership day, Dr. Tim Lautzenheiser, he made these really cool leadership books that are photocopy and good for the kids, that are like, what are your goals for the year? How are you going to approach them? How are you going to go about it? How is your section going to get there? But then also, what are your strengths as a leader and what are your weaknesses as a leader? And then we talk about them in our leadership group. And my clarinet section leader would be like, I have this weakness, but that's a strength of the flute section leader. So when I'm struggling with this, I'm going to come talk to you, and we're going to work this through, and we're going to do it together. So if you've never seen those books, I would highly recommend them. They're fantastic. They're like little workbooks. I didn't photocopy them.
Dr. Tim can afford it.
Dr. Tim can absolutely afford it. He'll be fine.
As you think about so tell me about how you guys handle the programming of your show. So, you're likely, are you writing your own drill? Are you getting that outside? It's probably stock arrangements. Are you purchasing stuff from, using stuff from the library? Are you coming up with themes? So just kind of walk me through your planning process that you're doing. When does that start? And like, what are all the steps you're doing before the students actually show up?
I don't know about Erin. I've been working on it for the past week. That's when I started my marching band prep. We do stock arrangements. If I need to adjust the percussion parts, I will, just because that is my skill set, and that's what I can do. And then I am writing my own drill just because I can't afford to pay somebody to do it. And I've gotten to a point where we're not able to afford pieware, the like $500 every 3 years. So there's a lot of really great free software out there that I started using this year. Erin, I think you started using it this year too. The Field Concepts app. I'm a big fan. I like it. And it's free.
Game changer.
100%. And it's in color, like the field is green.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I'm not spending hours to figure out how to operate it. But so I won't start writing drill until I have my numbers and I know who ended up staying in band and who did not. It's usually not a huge turnaround within the high school numbers, but it is between 8th grade and high school. So I just don't know for sure who ended up staying and who didn't. And it usually changes by the first day of school anyway. So the show is planned. I will have choreographed by the end of summer the color guard routines. And then we're moving from there.
Are you handling the color guard choreography yourself, or are you relying on someone else for that?
I do the color guard choreography. If you didn't know, Erin was my cooperating teacher. And before then I was her color guard coordinator. So
oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're a percussionist for people who don't know as well. Yeah.
Yes. So is my husband. So is her husband.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's nice that you each have that skill that you can rely on, because that's something that a lot of people end up having to like find some external help for. So Erin, how about you? What does the planning process look like for you?
Yeah, so I always have a list of potential shows going on. And then so about this time, I started listening last week. I just hop on Pepper and I start looking for anything that's kind of relevant to it. I kind of try to stick near a theme, and then find a good opener, kind of a ballady middle, and then a mic drop closer. But then not only finding songs that fit those categories, but then I'm really looking into the scores of seeing what can fit the band that I'm going to have. Like, I have one trombone player and she's also a cheerleader, so I'm only going to get her half the time. So I make sure that things are doubled in the tenor sax part, and making sure that it musically fits our abilities, but then it's that perfect, on the cusp of challenging enough, since they're going to be playing it for 3 months. I don't want them to get bored of it by August 1st. So it's just like picking anything for a music program. It's finding something that's that perfect sweet spot. And then I don't do a whole lot more over the summer. I do look into color guard for it. I have a student that graduated 3 years ago from my high school who's doing color guard at K-State. So I send her the recordings and she'll put together some of the choreography for me, and then make videos for the girls. So that way, that's just how they learn it then, is just off the videos on YouTube. And then I have a band camp in August, but that's mostly for music and then parade marching. Because it's not required. We can't make it required. So I don't know who's exactly in band until the first couple days of school. And even then, kids are always trying to change their schedules in and out, or if anybody new moves into the district. So I don't even try to start writing drill at that point. I'll sometimes have some big picture, like I'm gonna have a hold here, we'll move here, transition to this point. Um, but then we're about a week or two into band and I finally know how many people I'm going to have, who's playing football, because I don't always get them for halftime, so I don't want them standing next to each other. And then up until this year, I've just written in drill by hand, and it's not awful, but it's really hard to see transitions. And then it always happens that we get to like set 5 and clarinet 1 sitting there like, I don't exist anymore, so I have to go back and rewrite everything. So it's been really nice having that Field Concepts app. So that way I can, at least, it always shows that I left someone out and I can drag them back down and make them part of it. And then I can see transitions and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of just a wild ride, and to make sure that everything fits the group exactly that I have in front of me, not try to, well, this would be really cool. Well, yeah, it would, but not for this class. So
Right, right. You
When
mentioned
I
about ballads, and that got me thinking of like my hot take for programming for small bands. And so I'd love to have your input on this. And remember, my degree is in music education and music performance, but I've never actually done it. Okay. So take this with a grain of salt. So I have a lot of opinions that I've never had to back up. um, but when I see small programs, especially when they typically program 3 pieces, and you've got like you mentioned, you've got an opener, a ballad, and then like some kind of, I love that you called it a mic drop closer. That's great. But the ballad is where things often tend to just go off the rails, right? And you'll have, first of all, it's like they don't have the instrumentation to really like play not only all the sustained melodies, but then or harmonies, but then also to have the melody featured properly. And they don't have enough rehearsal time to really get their marching technique down. And so as they're playing these chords, you hear that a lot, which is like making it worse. Ballads give more sustained notes to hear all of the intonation woes. Some directors have figured this part out, that you don't have to march in the same time as the ballad is. So if the ballad's at 80 beats a minute, you could march it at 160 beats a minute. So at least things keep moving, because otherwise it feels like a death march. But it can be kind of tricky. And I often feel like, man, these ballads, the idea of a ballad should be pretty liberal here. This should be a piece that maybe is more emotional content or is slightly slower than the other, but it shouldn't be one where we just hang out the band members to die. So anyway, thoughts on that? Do you guys agree, disagree? Am I wrong? Tell me what you think.
I don't
I
always
go.
I don't always program a ballad. I know I probably should, but when I'm programming music, I'm looking at, does it fit the theme that the kids want to do, because they're the ones that are voting on it and they're the ones that are going to have to play it, and is it something that they're going to enjoy? We're looking at doing one this year because I really want to play a Barbie show, and I want the ballad to be I'm Just Ken so badly.
Okay.
I so badly want it.
We started working Dance the Night Away in middle school. They learned it all this week, and it's so good. You should get it.
Yes.
Yes, they love it. It's so great.
I told the band if we did it, I would take all of their white plumes and dye them pink, and we're just doing it.
Please do.
I want to do it so bad. That's my take on ballads. If it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, they'll live.
So super lyrical. If it's something like one of our shows, we went with Live and Let Die. It was the James Bond one. So it starts out slower, but then it picks up. So that's the ballad part.
Yeah.
Because you're exactly right. Otherwise, it's a huge dip in the energy of the show. It doesn't sound great. It's cold outside. They're playing sharp. Like, it's not going to work.
Yeah, Erin, I mean, you nailed it. That's exactly right. I think so many times it just, that you come off the energy of that opener. The kids obviously like that opener, and then now you get into this drudgery of this ballad, and all the energy is just gone. All the flaws in the band are now exacerbated. Like, you hear everything that can go wrong, and it's so hard to recover from that. And I just wondered, like, who is it that wrote that you had to have two up tempo tunes in a ballad? Like, where is that canon somewhere? Is that in our the judge's pamphlet of like, all right, if they don't have a ballad, then they automatically, like, they're just,
It's definitely in the marching textbook that we all had to pay $70 for. It's like, it needs to have an opener and a ballad and a closer. In the end, like, are the kids enjoying it, and do they want to be involved in music? That's why we do what we do. So
yeah,
do what works for them. And I think with a rural community is you want to play towards your audience a ton more than where you have to doing kind of these concept shows and these bigger things, because they're what pay for you,
Yep.
They're what support you. So if they're not enjoying it, they're like, why do I really want to support that?
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, it's got to be and those types of rural schools, you it doesn't have to be a crowd pleaser, but if it is, it's helpful to get more support. And it could be a crowd pleaser and still be, you're still teaching quality musical concepts. And I think more than anything, people just want to, I mean, I think the kids want to feel good doing the show they're doing. And I think parents want to see their kids looking and sounding good out there. So I think if that's the focus, then that matters more than whether there was, a ballad or not. So,
and they would look great with pink plumes.
Yeah, well, everybody looks great with pink plumes. I mean, that's obvious. So retaining students, that's something that's kind of been mentioned a little bit, and specifically that retention going from middle school to high school or junior high to high school, depending on what your layout is. That could be kind of a challenging thing because students either are worried they can't do sports or other activities, or that they won't have time for it in high school, or some maybe parents worry that that if kids are doing band, then other studies they might fall behind in other classes, which that you just want to, like, kind of tell them, like, no, being in band's going to help the other classes. Like, I mean, the fact that I was in band gave me friends that were actually, like, smart and helped me in all my other classes, friends that would normally never associate with me. So, like, that only helped me academically. It never, ever, ever hurt me. And so trying to get parents to see that's important. But talk about what those challenges are and specifically what you're doing to increase retention during both of those historic drop-off periods.
You go.
Erin, I'm gonna pick you to go first.
We just don't want to talk at the same time. I have two pretty big activities that I think help a lot with retention, on top of just talking to the kids and being real about, like, I'll point out specific students that I know they look up to in high school and say, hey, do you see that kid that also, is in cross country and is in the musical and has a 4.0 GPA, and then, like, just point out some of those role models that they can look up to, because in the eyes of a middle schooler, if you're a high schooler, that's the coolest person that exists. So that is very impressionable to them. Also, what has helped with high school retention is every 4 years we take a big trip And so we've gone down to San Antonio and performed at the Alamo Bowl, and we've been to Orlando and performed at the Cheez-It Bowl. So the kids know every 4 years that they're going to get a big trip. So sometimes they stay in, and there's a couple that are just there for the trip, but I'm hoping that they gain enough throughout that time that even if they leave the program as a sophomore or junior, that they are still maintaining a life as a lifelong musician. So maybe it's just not happening in the band classroom, but they're still playing somewhere, singing, or supporting the band department. And then our second activity, we have a yearly mass band event. So I get all of my 5th through 12th graders together and we rehearse all morning. We have one of those pieces by Michael Sweeney that has 3 levels to it. So 5th and 6th grader on level 1, middle school play level 2, and high school play level 3. And then when they play together, it creates one beautiful masterpiece. So we work on that all morning, but then we have a lot of bonding time. So I send like all the clarinets together and they go do little clarinet things. And then the trumpets disappear into oblivion and I see them 20 minutes later. I don't know what they did, but they all came back. So they do great things. Percussion always pulls out drumline and they have a blast and teach some super simple cadences and stuff. So that bonding throughout the different age groups really happens there. And then that's when they see a lot of like, hey, I know that kid, but he also plays that. We go to a school that really does support kids being involved in everything, and they're in band and they're a little cool. So we try to make it a little bit more fun. We had dance parties throughout the day. So I think the big trips and then mass band have helped retention quite a bit in our program.
Gotcha. Kirsten, how about you?
We also have those role models. So I have teacher aides that come from the high school that kind of help me run sectionals at the middle school, go run and make copies and things like that. They just make themselves present in the middle school classrooms. And same as Erin said, they're involved in everything. They're in the musical, they're in choir, they're in golf, they're doing all of these things, but they're still very active and very passionate about band, that they're getting me for 2 hours out of the day instead of just the one. And then we do like a middle school night for the football season and as well as the basketball season, where our 7th and 8th graders are welcome to come and play with the high school band. So this year when we did it, 7th and 8th grade sat in the stands and watched pregame, and they were with my husband because it's just me. And then once they were done with that, they went up into the stands with them and I intermingled them with each other. They're having these conversations with the high schoolers, asking all of these questions, what it's like to be in band. And then they performed one of our halftime pieces with us, just standing in front of the band. And I think that was a big drive home for a lot of them, because I think a lot of them think marching band's a lot of work. And it is a lot of work, but it's not as much as you think it is. Like you're not running 2 miles and then playing your instrument.
Right.
It's doable and you can do it. You're capable.
Right.
And then basketball is kind of similar. We just play in the stands and hang out and have fun and eat popcorn and try not to blow things into our instruments.
And if you do, then you have Josh come clean it out for you. Or
Yes.
get the popcorn kernels out or whatever. Yeah.
A real MVP.
Yeah. How do you prepare for those students that are the middle school students that are gonna come participate with the high school students? What's that preparation look like so that they feel ready to play with the high school students?
I think doing the middle school nights helps a lot. I think they think the music is more challenging than what it is. And if we're able to put it together in our classroom, then you're absolutely able to put it together on the field with the rest of the high schoolers and moving. And then our section leaders do a lot of help with the freshmen as they come in, correcting little things as they need to go. But then they become really, really fluent by their sophomore year, that they're also leading those freshmen. And it's just incredibly helpful.
Just because you got me thinking about it, I did an episode of the same podcast called Grow Your Band with Tom Spears and Tessa Friedman from Warrenton, Missouri. And Tom has left teaching, but Tessa is still there and just does a great job. And in that episode specifically, they talked about ways of which they have been successful in pulling back students who have dropped band, pulling them back in high school. maybe a year, 2 years later, and even using non-music students as well to come back in, putting them in the percussion section, both either frontline ensemble or battery, and kind of the whole thing they've done that. So for anyone who's heard that or whatever, that might be worth a listen to kind of go back and listen, because I thought that was a pretty clever idea of like building your numbers through getting students to come back. And sometimes that can happen because Erin, you kind of mentioned the trip every 4 years, and that, yeah, if the trip coincides with like their senior year or something, like that's perfect timing. But when it's their freshman year, then it's like, oh, you got 3 more years of this without the hope of a big trip. And so sometimes that can be kind of challenging. But just as an aside, I thought that episode was really good, and could be, I think, anything we can do to get kids back into music, even if it's not back in on their original instrument, even if it's playing drums. I mean, God forbid, even if it's playing drums, like it's better than nothing, you know? But anyway, I think that's always a good thing. And I've never in all my years, as old as I am and as many people I've met an adult that tells me, man, if there's one thing I'm thankful for, it's that I dropped out of band and quit learning how to play an instrument. Like, no one has ever said that, but I can't tell you the number of times I've heard the opposite of either I wish I would have learned to play, I never did, or I wish I'd have stuck with it. I hear that constantly, but I never hear anyone say like, man, one of the best decisions I ever made was quit music. Like that just never happens. So, okay. So tell me about Bandtoberfest. I don't know anything about it. I'm going into this with zero knowledge. So I want to know what it is. I want to know why you started it and what's going on with it for this year. So you two duke it out as to who's kicking this thing off, but tell me all about it.
So I always like to approach gripe sessions with, is this something we can solve, or is this something that we're just being angry about? And
Nice.
I don't like to approach things just to be angry about it. I want to come in and fix it, because you're not going to get anything done if you don't try to fix it.
Yeah.
So it kind of birthed at KMEA with Erin and I in a hotel lobby. Like, this isn't working. Festivals right now are not working for us. They're not set up for our size band and our demographic of band. So what are we going to do to change that and to make it a more educational and beneficial experience for our students in the long run? Erin, if you want to add in on that.
That was perfect. Yeah, we've been going to a bunch of different festivals and just not feeling like our size of band and our, not necessarily ability level, but just, the role that our band plays in our marching program is very represented well. And then, we're going to these festivals that we're getting put up against 6A schools who are in completely different boats than we are. And, that's it. And then so our kids leave feeling pretty defeated. And that's not how you want to leave. A score is a score, that's fine. But they were like, well, we don't stand a chance because we saw that band and look at what they have on their sideline. And they have 5 directors down there. And you look at them and you go, yeah, sometimes people have more things than we do. But we wanted to create something that would support kind of our mid-sized to small bands in this region. And we can make it go beyond that too. So that was kind of how it all got started.
I think a lot of it too was like having the conversations with our students. Like, what are you noticing from this? Like, are you enjoying going here, or are you just enjoying not being in class for the full day? Like, are you getting something out of this, or are you just
Which is fair.
Those 6A bands? And no, totally fair. That's one of my biggest recruitment tools. Hey, you want to miss school? Come to your band. But
right, yeah.
But also, I had less kids that were encouraged by the bigger bands than they were that were discouraged by the bigger bands. They're like, we'll never be that. That'll never be us. Why are we here?
Yeah.
So that's where the foundation of Bandtoberfest kind of came. And we were kind of thinking about the bands in our area that are similar to us, with those invitations and who we can pull in to do that. But then also figuring out what kind of educational experience are we going to give them other than get on the field and go.
Mm-hmm.
So the format of it was like, every band is going to get 30 minutes you're going to get 20 minutes to do a clinic and then 10 minutes to do your final performance. And that is what you are adjudicated off of. And so when you did the 20 minutes, you could kind of figure out, do you want to do your full show and then get a, tiny clinic and then be able to do your full show? Or did you want to do song by song? How did we do that? So Erin's band, I think, did full show, clinic, and then did your final performance. And then my band did song by song. So we played song one, got a little bit notes that could apply to the rest of the show or not. And then we would do our final performance. And the hope with them getting on the field and getting comfy and used to it was that your first run wasn't your worst, or was your worst run.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I think, especially with our rural schools, we are put into different places and you're going to play different.
Yeah.
So getting you used to where you're at and getting you comfy with what's going on around you. When we would go to festivals, we would be on turf, and our kids don't march on turf.
Yeah.
Right.
We got grass and we got divots and we got holes, and it is what it is. Maybe the numbers are in the right spot. I don't know.
Right.
And then when we're at the collegiate level, they've got the tapes for the high school hashes too. And trying to explain that to them, they're like, I don't get it. I don't understand. What's the point? Why are we doing it differently than how we would do it on our field? So first being the worst, your second would be the best. And that's where your adjudication comes from. And your kids feel like, I fixed something little in between to make a difference in the outcome. And I learned something that I can take home either for next marching season or that I can take off the field and put into the concert arcs.
I love that. That is such a much better experience than what I think normally smaller bands like that have. You think about those smaller bands put in so much time and energy and effort, got up early that morning, got on the school bus, drove to this festival, played you stepped off the field at 8:15 in the morning and did your one run through, like you said, on an unfamiliar stadium, unfamiliar surroundings, like unfamiliar turf, maybe not have had your best performance. That 7-minute show's over, pack it all up and basically go home. And often not make finals if there's like a finals for that, because you're up against these other massive programs, and there's going to be only one 1A, 2A, 3A program that might be selected out of each category, and then that's it. That's not a very rewarding experience. Whereas making it an educational experience and a performance experience definitely adds more value and makes it worth the time, effort, energy, and expense of getting there. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So who do you bring in for judges for that?
I think the judges were monumental in making it such a big success this year. We just pulled in some directors that we knew would be highly encouraging and very knowledgeable. This year we had Dr. Payne from K-State, Dr. Faze from Doane University in Nebraska, and then Dr. Knopp from Friends University. And so we would consistently have 2 clinicians up in the press box, and they would be doing the traditional notes on the rubrics. And then we had 1 clinician down on the field that was working with the students in real time. So they would rotate around, so they got to see the different groups, both on the field and from up top.
Where is this at? Where's Bandtoberfest at? Which one of yours was it? One of your schools?
Yeah, it was at Raleigh County this year, and then we're going to rotate to Chapman and go back and forth each year.
Gotcha. Okay. And when is it?
It's also a fundraiser for the host school.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It is so when we have it, it's in the middle of October, which is typically the wrap up time for your not good football teams and your not good football bands. So it's a nice little end cap to your season if you're not going on into the postseason.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
During the day on a Wednesday, because that's for a lot of our festivals. We can't do any Saturdays. Like my program specifically can't do any Saturdays because that's cross country and volleyball. That's half my band right there. So during the school day, and then on a day that there's no other sport after school, so we're not racing to get back, so that way they can get on another bus. So
oh, that's awesome.
a very particular day in October.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of the planning process for like, what day can we do
Yeah.
that everybody will be able to be there. And my kids actually, so we had it, I think around the same time, middle of October last year at Riley County. And I had dairy judging. I had 7 kids that were doing dairy judging.
We could have just
So
brought
we-
cows to the festival. Let's do that this year.
Well, so the cool thing that happened was I was talking to our FFA advisor and I was talking to my principal, and my principal's like, I'm just going to take a Suburban out there, watch you guys perform, get the kids that need to go to dairy judging on the Suburban, and I will drive them to dairy judging. So my principal went and watched the whole thing, and she thought it was incredible. And that was a big part of me saying, hey, I want to host this year. So they were on my side.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What a great experience, and a much better experience, and a great way a better way to end the season than I think what we'd often would do at some big contest where you're just going to get crushed.
We're just not competitive, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think being, I mean, I went to a competitive program, and competitive is my background. But I think in a lot of respects, it's really overrated. The thing that was really great about my background is that I got to play in a lot of other ensembles too. And even though my high school program was marching focused, I would say, but we had wind ensemble, we had jazz band, and I even got to play in orchestra, which I felt like was, a tremendous experience. Now it was a big school, so that helped. But not having everything just be solely centered around marching just has limited value, I think. I mean, it has value, but there's more to it than just that. And certainly being able to bring in those clinicians, I think, to help out with that stuff, and doing it on a Wednesday that's so great. I mean, kids are missing school, which they love, like that kind of helps with that side of it. That's like another fun recruitment thing. Probably, maybe I would imagine it's easier to get the type of clinicians you want, because they're not often out working other festivals on a Wednesday. Like every clinician's available on that, so you can maintain good people there. So that's really, really a great thing, and it's a good fundraiser for you. So how many bands have attended last year for Bandtoberfest?
We had 6. Yeah. So with our time, we hope to grow it to about 10 groups. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you've got room for more. So if people want more info, how can they reach out to learn more?
You could probably just email us. I'm sure you'll stick that email somewhere, or I could tell you over the interwebs.
I'll put your work email addresses in the show notes. Is that okay with both of you if those are in there?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
It was a lot of upfront work, but it was a lot more fun in the end. So not encouraging more people to do their thing, but do something that changes the way band is operating. If it's not working in your area, be the change.
Be the change you want to see. I think that's exactly right. I know in Missouri a couple of years ago, there was an initiative for small school band directors to put together their own kind of like festival circuit for both marching and contest, indoor and outdoor contest stuff. And the first couple of years as they were trying to get that off the ground, of course, funding was an issue. And so to help with that, Ernie Williams Music, we just paid all the expenses. And with working with their leadership to be like, okay, you need to be charging fees and collecting money, because we can't pay all the expenses in perpetuity, but we'll pay them all this year. We'll pay, I think we paid 70% the next year, and then 35% every year going after that, to mainly just help them to get off the ground and to build enough money, like enough of a savings account where they always had the money they needed to like secure the sites and whatever, but those were still competitive. And I felt like there's an opportunity for something more like kind of what you're doing. And we do have a couple of festivals that we sponsor that are earlier in the season where they are getting those kind of like that kind of clinic and feedback. I think in general, that's such a great experience to actually make this an educational thing in addition to performance. And so that's such a great thing. So yeah, I think if anyone listening to this is in Missouri and wants to start something like that, we'd be happy to help and to put them in touch with you all as well to kind of get this started as well. So be a great thing.
A lot of it too is just finding the music educators that believe the same things that we did. So like Josh Cook was huge in getting this going. He was able to sponsor with Flint Hills Music, I think the judges pays for it. And then the fees that the bands paid covered kind of everything else, the plaques, the director gifts, the trophies that we did at the end. Because while it wasn't a competition, we did want to find something else. Like, this is what your band is doing really well. And so we had captions at the end. We had like a drumline caption, an auxiliary caption. And we challenged the judges to find something that band was doing really well, in addition to giving, their normal ratings and their normal scores, but to not just make it a participation trophy.
Right.
In the end, it was like, you are doing this well. We can fix the other things, but good job doing this thing.
I feel like we've mentioned his name. We should probably clarify. Josh Cook is the repair shop manager and a road rep for Flint Hills Music, which is the store that Ernie Williamson bought in February. So for anyone in Missouri who's listening, that's like, who's this Josh guy? He's first of all, he's an awesome person and like super selfless and giving, and will give you the shirt off his back, and he'll do that at 3 a.m. if you need it. Like, he's just that kind of guy, and he's a super repair tech and great road rep and great friend. I think I know from on his end, he views all of his customers that he serves, they're all his friends, and he cares for them all very deeply and wants to see good outcomes for them, and will do whatever he can to help them be successful. So if anyone's wondering who's Josh,
and not just for us, but for our kids, like, he cares about us as people, but he truly just wants to see music thrive in these kids' lives, and will do anything we need him to do to make that happen.
Yeah.
He came in clinic for my jazz band last week, and he was fantastic. It was so
He
great.
came and worked with my concert band last week. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thebomb.com.
Yeah, I saw the picture of him working with your band, Erin, at Riley, and that's definitely, that looked like it was a lot of fun, and I'm sure he ate that up. So
oh yeah, so good.
yeah. One other thing that I just wanted to touch on. So I've only got to see you both work with students once, and the time that I saw Erin, she was like up to here doing band karate in her classroom, and so she's doing all the testing, and so it was, there was a lot going on that day as you're testing students off, which I think everyone can relate to, like what that process is like. But Kirsten, I loved that your band, you had them like rehearsing to stuff, and even when you stepped away to talk to Josh and I for 5 or 10 minutes, you had a high school student who was helping out, and this was you're at your middle school, but they like had this routine that they were kind of going through, and they all knew to like do it, and so even when you stepped off the podium, band kept happening. So can you tell me a little bit about what I saw that day, and then explain how you got it to that point?
Yeah, so Thursdays are Book It Day, and if you try to take away Book It Day, there will be absolute anarchy within the band room. If you don't know what Book It is, it's like Kahoot, but it's like a review game where you can ask, very specific questions, and they answer it and they compete. So typically what I'll do is the questions will line up with the elements in the method book that we're doing. So I've created a bunch of different sets that go on with that. They'll play probably 2 rounds, and then Thursday is Throwback Thursday. And Throwback Thursday, they can pick any number in the book that we've already done and play it again. Because I feel like it's super important to go back and review all of those concepts that you've done before, and not just, congratulations, you played number 2. Okay, we're moving on. We're never going to play it again. I do have limitations. I don't want them to go any lower than number 18, which is Hot Cross Buns. That's as low as I'll go.
You do have professional standards, so
yes. I don't want to hear our first note again. It's no.
Right.
So
I go back and do the first note.
I will sometimes. So like, once we're at this point in the year, we're not going back and playing our first note, right? Once we hit a certain point, I'm like, Hot Cross Buns, this is as low as you can go, friends. But they know that every Thursday is that day. And so they know when they come in, they grab their chair, they grab their stand, they put their instrument together, they get out their Chromebooks, and they're on Book It ready to go, or I'm leaving them behind. because I'm not waiting for you. And if they miss the login for the game, you don't get to play that round. So it gets a little intense and some kids kind of run and it gets a little sketchy sometimes, but it's fine. It's controlled chaos to an extent.
That's good. That's good.
And then I always tell my beginners, especially, is what I'm trying to get them to do is be independent learners and be able to function with or without me. While I love my kids and I always want to be in front of them, there's times where I can't be, and I want them to be able to operate absolutely everything the same way that we would if I was there. So the expectations are the same when we have a sub too. I'll usually coach them through it like the day before and say, hey, you're doing these, so-and-so is going to lead this, so-and-so is going to lead this, and it'll just go and it'll flow and it is what it is. That Thursday that you came in, I luckily had my TA there. So she was able to step in front and just, I say, okay, 1, 2, ready, go. And then they do it and they're ready. And they know if anybody's on the podium, that instrument is on their knee. We're not playing until we play together, or I'm going to throw a little cotton snowball at you because I have a 5-gallon bucket of snowballs.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I've had music stands and erasers thrown at me, so cotton snowball's nothing. Yeah.
I hear so much from people that like things are being thrown, and I was like, I will never actively throw something that is going to hurt you. Am I going to throw the snowball at you? Absolutely. But it's an overglorified pom-pom. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, pencils, batons, literally a music stand once. Yeah. I've had erasers, and it's just, I was just chatty, I would like to talk. It's not like, cause I was doing anything super inappropriate or whatever. I mean, I was just socializing, I'm a trumpet player. What do you expect?
As trumpet players do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was probably just trying to explain how they could play that better,
How they can play it to your standard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I just was really impressed with, first of all, I was really impressed with both of your programs, and that, like, for the size of schools you're in, I felt like you had not only every kid in the school in your program. I think you pulled some kids that weren't even like in that county that were in your program. Like, there was so many kids there for these small schools, and that was such a great thing to see. And then they just sounded really good. Like, they were all on task. They were, even though it was kind of chaos in Erin's room, just because she was doing like the play testing, and the kids who weren't testing were preparing for their testing. So they were practicing. So it was a little chaotic, but like chaotic in a good way, that they're like, you could tell like everyone's focused on what they're doing. And Erin, specifically, you had one kid, I think he may have been a percussionist. I'm not exactly sure. But after Josh and I had been standing there for a few minutes, and we were just, waiting for you to just have a second to tell us you're too busy to, to talk to us, which we understood. But he came up to us and he asked if we needed anything. Like, he was like, excuse me, gentlemen. He's like, is there anything I can help you with? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's really nice. No, but like, thank you for offering that. Like,
It
was so polite.
They drive us crazy sometimes, but then in the end, they're all the good kids.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. So I think maybe the last question I'd like to ask you is, as we go through, so knowing what you know now, what do you wish you knew earlier in your career? And I'm really kind of specifically thinking about this, of people listening that may have less experience than what you have, or they could have more, it doesn't really matter. But what are the things that you know now that you wish you knew when you started out?
It is a very loaded question.
Because I feel like there's a lot of things, but I want to narrow it down a little bit. Just because it's been on the forefront, I've been helping with a bunch of interviews at our school, preparing for next year. For anybody getting into looking for a new job, or changing or starting their first band director job, finding not only a program that you like, but then a program that fits you, and not only your philosophy and what you want to do with the program, but also that fits your lifestyle. Because I feel like, especially if you're going the rural route, it's all on your shoulders. If you're doing 5/12, if you're doing 6/12, it's a lot of work. And so, if not to scare anybody away with it, because it's incredibly rewarding, and you get to start them out and finish them and their band career 7-8 years later, and nobody else gets to do anything like that. So it's the best thing on the planet. but to find something that really does work with you in your life personally. So that way you can personally flourish in your career and the students then have the opportunity. Because if you're unhappy with where you're at, then they're not going to want to be in your program. So
a lot of people I've seen see the rural jobs as the stepping stone jobs to get to those 6A and those 5A gigs. And I think the rural bands are really just the place that you have to dig your feet into to see that outcome, because you're not going to see it within a couple years. You're going to have to be here for a while to see what you want to see. Whereas coming into a well-established, strong program is just going to happen in year one. And you're not going to see that in the rural jobs until a lot later. So this is not a space to just see it as I'm going to move on and do something better, because this is the better. You get to do all of it. I get to go from high school band to my beginners, and I think that's a hoot. We're playing Moscow 1941 and then Hot Cross Buns. It's the biggest variance, but it's so neat to see and watch the progression of students throughout the day, where you've built them to and where you've gotten them to. And then also, a lot of the classroom management things just don't happen overnight. You have to teach those things from day one and reinforce them every day. If you want your kids to not play when you're on the podium, you have to remind them and you have to make it happen. They're not just going to know to not do that.
Right.
Or tell them one time and then they'll stop doing it forever.
Yeah.
So if you want your room to look like that, that's something you have to instill in them, that they want to see what you want to see from them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes great sense. I mean, I don't work with children really. I work with adults, and I can't tell them only once. I have to tell them all the time and remind them. I have to be reminded. So yeah, that's certainly a great reminder. I think so many times we think that we've covered this. This should be, understood by now, but it doesn't work that way. Your comment about the rural schools thing, I think, is so right. I think it's totally fair. And I understand why younger teachers want to go to those big schools. Likely they came out of a big school, so that's what they know. And they don't have the experience in small schools. But teaching in a small school is extremely rewarding in ways that, in certain ways that a big program can't be. And not to say that teaching in a big program doesn't also have its rewards, because it certainly does. But man, there's some joys to be had in teaching in a small school that you can literally only get there. And I think one of those things are the things you mentioned. It's the fact that you get to start your beginners, you are seeing those students from 5th or 6th grade all the way through graduation. And not only does that give you more control of your program, but like the impact you have on those students' lives, not just in music, but just in leadership and just their life in general, is immeasurable. Like it's really profound what you can do. 2 folks and 2 episodes that really changed my mind on that. And I'm not intentionally just plugging the podcast, but this podcast is just a labor of love. Don't make any money with it. It's just a thing to do. But I did an episode with Ron Sykes from Missouri. The episode's called "Teaching in Rural Schools: The Best Job You've Never Considered." And Ron lays his was so good. We did 2 episodes on it, but that one specifically was about teaching in rural schools, and he really made a case for like how attractive. I mean, after talking with him, it made me understand like, oh, I can see why this isn't, you're not sacrificing anything to be at a small school. You're not giving anything up. Like you're getting a lot for doing that, to do that. And then another another episode we did was with Chris Sprague, who spent most of her career at Bradleyville here in Missouri, MMEA president, just a fantastic educator. And she talks quite a bit in those episodes as well. So I think if you are someone listening, that if you're at a small program, especially if you're at a small program and just maybe need some encouragement or inspiration, those 2 episodes in particular would be really, I mean, you'll listen to those and be like, oh, wow, there's some great ideas there, from 2 educators that are on the opposite end of their career from where you guys are at. They're either like Chris is retired, and I think Ron is getting close to that. So anyway, this was so much fun. This was so exciting to get to hear this. And like literally from the minute I walked into both your classrooms, I was like, I want to do this. Like, this would be such a good thing. And when Kirsten, when you'd mentioned that you guys had just done this thing talking about some of these topics on another podcast, I was like, oh, this would be such a great way to like kick this off together. And so I'm really glad that you guys made the time to do it and to be here and to share your experiences, your wisdom, and all of your trials and tribulations you've gone through up to this point on these topics. So really grateful for you both. I'm going to add your emails into the production notes. So anyone who's listening, if they want more information or want to talk to you about starting their own Bandtoberfest or would like to come to yours, they can. And yeah, really appreciate both of you for taking your time this evening on a busy time of school year, because we're recording this in early April and every music educator is super busy this time of year. And so carving out an hour and a half on a Tuesday night to have this conversation, I really, really appreciate it.
April is the October of spring.
I've never heard that, but I think you just coined a phrase.